Hi, everybody. Welcome to Simon on the Sofa. Yes, another hangout for you all to enjoy. And I just had a few little technical setup issues. So if you're jumping on this a little live viewers, then I apologize. I'm going to dive straight in because I want to utilize what we have with you and sitting with a wonderful man called Agnos. And I came across Chris's work and message via the explore around Charles Ian McKenzie, Tim McCartney, and Polly Higgins, to name a few people out there in the world that are really sort of pioneering a vision of a new earth. And I first started to come in across Chris's videos on sustainable human on the YouTube, really jam-packed inspirational videos that were really just bringing forward a message of what's happening in the world and what's not happening in the world, and how we can actually really, you could say, how can we really live this vision of a more beautiful world, this vision of a new world, and really depict that. He calls himself a storyteller, and it's really good because the way he uses video and the way that he shares the message that he believes in is really powerful. So I think that's a little intro. As you all know, I show up on these conversations and just check in. I haven't spoken to Chris before. I know he's a very active, happy to have him as to the community. So welcome, Chris. Great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Simon. I love having real conversations. That's one of my passions in life. So I think it's great what you're doing in terms of bringing this transparent conversation about what's really happening in the world to anyone who's interested in it. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think what would be lovely to dive in with, Chris, straight away is, could you just bring the viewers, because some of them would never have heard of you, can you just bring the viewers with share a little bit of your story? And when I'm saying this to you, I want you to not necessarily share what you've shared before. I'm just going to throw that out there as a seed. And I'd love you to just share a little backstory of the maybe even your pain points or the vulnerability points that have led you to be really dedicating your life to the sustainable human, to the new story to people, to the gift economy. I'd love you to bring us up to speed, if that's okay. Just a little story of Chris Agnos. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure. I think I'll start with an awareness that I recently came to about myself. How about that?
Love it.
I recently, in the last year, became aware of my hidden motivation for doing almost everything that I had done in my entire life. And that hidden motivation was really to be liked, to be appreciated, to be needed. These are things that I realized I was living my entire life to achieve, to get. The validation of my parents, for example, was something that was a deep hidden motivation for me in doing almost everything that I did in my life. And this includes, going to college, working in the corporate world. It included going back to school to get a master's degree in sustainability. And then all of these things, it even, much of my initial work with Sustainable Human also was to get this kind of validation, or sometimes even recognition. It was most of my life was, I guess you could say, driven by my ego pursuits. And it has only been recently that I became aware of these hidden motivations. And what I've been doing since then is really trying to pay attention to a lot of my hidden motivations. So I ask myself why a lot. Why do I want this? Why do I desire this? Why is this interesting to me? Why does this hurt? Why does this bring pain to me? Why do I feel sad right now? And all of these things help me to reconnect myself to me. And that's one of the things that happened as a result of living for other people, is that I lost touch with who I am, with what I want, with what makes me happy, with what makes me sad. And, you know, and that's a very sad thing. And I noticed that, you know, I'm not the only one in this society who's been going through this and becoming aware of these things.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, and there's a tiny echo, I think, on maybe your side. I'm just checking in. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
You can hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that sort of alive in the moment, what's happening for you with that level of awareness that you're experiencing. And I feel that that's something that's moving across humanity, especially in the world that I'm in, moving across humanity as a whole. It's like there seems to be, I know what it was always been big questions like, who am I, what am I? There seems to be a vision of sustainable human. What does it really mean to be human? And how to uncover the subtleties, and really how to uncover the subtleties of who we are, and those hidden subconscious programs and those habits and those cravings that we have within us, right? These emotional, almost emotional wounds. And I like the way you described that the hidden, we of them, right? There's not an awareness what we're functioning from. So I really appreciate that. And what comes up for me as you're sharing that, and that is that how is that, what you just shared, how is that now influencing your creativity as a messenger, as a storyteller, and where you are right now? What shifted? I'm quite curious to know what may have shifted, or what's emerging even.
Well, you know, part of what happens when you live your life for someone else is you don't have a lot of empathy usually. You don't really take the time to inquire as to what is somebody else's story. Why are they acting the way they're behaving? And, you know, is there some fundamental thing that's wrong with them? Are they quote unquote evil? Is that why they're doing this behavior? Or, you know, was their behavior a result of their cumulative experience in the world so far? And if so, well, what is that experience? And how did that experience change the course of that person's life? From my own personal perspective, this desire and this need for validation affected so much of my behavior towards others. If I was, you know, mean or cruel, perhaps in a particular moment, I could probably trace that back to an unmet need that I had. So for me, it really comes down to, when we think about how we want to live in a sustainable world, how are we going to get there? To me, it's going to require, you know, a level of empathy, a level of introspection. We have to understand ourselves, and we have to understand who we are. And who I think we all are is a sum total of our relationships and experiences in the world. So we all have had relationships to different people, to animals, to our environment. And the way that we think about ourselves in relation to those things impacts our behavior in the world. So the story at the root, I mean, everyone has a story of how the world works. And this story has huge impacts on our behavior and the way that we see things in the world. So to me, this is the root of sustainability, is we have to get the story right of who we are. And I think if we do, then we don't need to worry so much about the individual behaviors of people, because they will be grounded in the truth of who they are, and that they know that, you know, that everything is connected, that everything has an impact. All our behaviors have impacts in the world. And now it's a question of, what are those impacts? And how can I create the type of impact that I want? So my big thing is, I'd love people to become conscious storytellers of their lives, to realize the story that they're living in, realize that it is just a story, and there could be other stories that could fit the same narrative or the same facts, and then to choose the story that makes the most sense for the outcome that we want to achieve in life. And what story is going to help us get there? So I'll give you an example. You know, like let's imagine for a moment that you're lost in the woods in the winter, and it's cold and it's snow, and you're trekking through the snow, and you have no idea which way is which or how to get anywhere. In this moment, what story are you going to tell yourself? Are you going to tell yourself the story that I'm lost, I don't know where to go, I'm frozen, I can't do anything, this is the end, I'm gonna die?
Right.
Is that the story that you tell yourself? Or do you tell yourself another story in that moment, saying, I want to see my family again, I want to see my friends again, I want to see my kids again, I'm going to do whatever I can to get to the next place? So these are two stories that you can tell yourself in the moment, and they'll have drastically different outcomes for that situation. So that's just quick.
Right. Yeah. No, I appreciate that, because one of the things that I've spoken about for many years, and it's actually why I started these conversations, was because before I even had read much of Charles Eisenstein or the exploration of what's happening in society, and looked at all the systems that were seemingly crumbling around me, and started to absorb information, read books, etc. I was having this big sort of moment in 2007, 2008, where I realized my story was not my own. It was like, who am I? It was that same question of like, what story am I telling? And very much the story, of fame, ID pounds, and be famous, and it was a story that was very much about me, and driven from what we call, what the collective sort of call the ego, or I like to call the out of aligned ego, this sense of like, what can I get? And sort of, survival mentality of the fittest, only the fittest survive, you could say. And it was very, and alongside this, I was never really aware of my single competitive drive. I was didn't really, that was my, so I like story, because and self in this time, with all the information and all the different opinions and concepts and theories and ideas, of really curious as to this new story unfolding, because there's obviously multiple stories within story, and I'm really curious as to, like what you just said, where we as individuals can really own and take responsibility, the ability to respond with that more conscious awareness. Because, and I'd love to hear your views on this, is like, for example, this isn't a judgment or a put down, but not everybody is consciously aware. Not everybody is ready to look at themselves. Not everybody's ready to go sort of inward. And as we know, many messengers for many years, many storytellers have said, look within, know thyself, go within or go without. And the inner, outer transformation occurs from. So I'm always pondering, and some people say, certain stories are always going to stay alive. They've just always been alive, and you're either in them, and different stories are like a different dimension. So I'm curious as to how, because it's been many years now you've been on this path, I know, and you've just launched Sustainable Human, this online community where it's like a resource where people can come together and share their gifts. And I know that you very much live for this vision of a more cultural human being. I don't want to put your mouth. I'd love to sort of talk of the tip. I love the point, and everybody, not everybody's going to consciously become aware, right?
Well, I mean, we become aware of certain things. I mean, I don't think anybody can ever achieve perfect awareness and perfect conscious awareness. Even those people who spend time, like you and I, trying to learn about ourselves, will never become, fully aware of all of the subconscious drives in us. So, a lot of it is really just making the attempt. And if you think like you have to achieve, that's part of the old stories, that you have to achieve a lot or work really hard at trying to do something in order to achieve it. But in this instance, I don't think it's like that. It's just something you practice. You work on it. And And the way that I like to do it is, you know, to really bring it home is to really talk about human needs, to talk about our own needs, to become aware of our needs, because really almost all of our subconscious behavior or our unconscious behavior is an attempt to meet a need that we have. And most of the time we're not aware of the need itself. And we're trying to meet a need that we think it's going to meet it. So I think a big example of this is, you know, the market and marketing. You know, marketing is trying to tell you that you have this need and that this product is going to meet that need. It's constantly being driven at home everywhere. But really, they're in the business of manufacturing needs. They don't really pay attention to the real needs. So in the Western developed society, we've taken care of most people's material needs. Now, there's still plenty of people who go without because of the system that we've created, of scarcity that we've created. But the material needs, by and large, have been met. What hasn't been met in the Western world, in the highly developed world, are the emotional needs of people, and they're in fact systematically going unmet and being preyed upon and being used to sell physical products to you to try to meet emotional needs. And that's the big con and lie in our society, is that some new product is going to meet your need for validation or for connection or for love or for intimacy. These are things that are core human needs. And in fact, if babies do not receive this when they're born, they will die. They learned this in the orphanages in the 1800s, that you know, they would give them everything they needed, all of their material needs would be met. They would still die if they were not held and touched. So we have this core human need to be connected to another, to be seen, to be heard, validated. And when those go unmet, then we start acting a little crazy. And we start doing really weird things to try to meet those needs. So, you know, we might try to shame somebody else in order to get their sympathy, or judge someone else in order to try to change their behavior to make them like us more or something. You know, we'll do crazy things like this that are that really make no sense and aren't going to help us to meet our needs, but we think they are going to. And so we keep doing it, and it winds up creating more disconnection and isolation from ourselves because we're not actually meeting the real need underneath. So I think the best thing we can do really is to become aware of those core needs, realize that we are connected beings, social beings. And if we don't have that feeling of connection, then we aren't happy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think I got a little bit of feedback on the sound, but I don't know how it's sounding your end. Is it sounding okay for you?
I can hear it. It's better when I don't see your picture. I don't know. Maybe I should turn off my picture.
No, it's good. I'm happy to leave it like this because I'm more interested in the sound and the visual, and people have seen my face many times. So you can look at my little animation. There you go. That I don't look like anymore. Do you want me to turn mine off? Because I can turn mine. No. If you can hear me, okay, that's great. I just
can hear you perfect right now.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Let's roll like this. Okay. So I think what's alive in me at the moment is I'm very much sort of diving deeper within myself, and at the moment I'm exploring more and more about the brain and the neural pathways. And I've been reading and exploring a man that you may know called Joe Dispenza, and there's many other messengers along in the sort of circles of Joe and neuroscience and new science, and I'm very much exploring. You know, there's big talk of new psychology, and I'm one of my passions is transparent communication. And as I'm taking that out there in the world and exploring that with people in workshops and events, and sort of inviting people to share openly, like what you just said, really real stuff, you know, sharing real emotions, what's happening, what's alive in them in the moment, the fears, the anxieties, and whatever's there, and creating safe spaces for that to happen. And what I'm finding is that the transformation in people and the realization that's arising in people when they just get, you know, I'm talking sometimes, Chris, this is 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes of sharing that some people are actually getting, right? It's not a lot of time. Me and you have already been speaking for nearly half an hour. So you can imagine, I'm sure you've done some of this work or experienced it yourself, circle work and sharing. Now, they are having huge realizations, and the opening and the softness in their face and the sparkle in their eyes that happens just from being heard and listened to, and everything you just shared, just being able to be held in that moment. Tears come up, emotion comes up, and not judging that emotion as right or wrong, good or bad. It's just energy moving. And then, we're holding that space. Everyone who's in the group is holding each other. And it's just such a, you can almost like cut out years, Chris. And I know I'm sort of maybe speaking to the converted with you, but nevertheless, for the people listening, you cut out almost years of communication and connection, because in an instant you're diving deeper into where somebody is in this moment with the real and rawness, just like how you began the conversation today, just diving in with sharing that intimacy and vulnerability of what you've just recently uncovered and how that's shifted your life. And I suppose sometimes I find that I'm on this quest that's driving me. At times I've said love's driving me, or something greater than me is driving me. And, giving it these names per se, trying to define that this force, this driving force. I know Ian McKenzie calls it the noosphere. Many different people name it different things, where it's almost as if, regardless of whether I live or die, there's this desire of the human organism, the planetary organism, to move more into what you're describing here, to move more into this collective awareness, this collective field. And then simultaneously, alongside that, without there wanting to be that sort of old story of like the religious fight of the light and the dark and so on. But within that, I sort of do find myself looking, even some of your videos you've created, I look at them and go, wow, the male patriarchy and the sort of masculine, the masculine dominated, women suppressed cultures that we've moved through. And not to just go into the negative, but like to really look at the suffering and the suffering of the animals and the suffering of our fellow humans. And, I read something the other day, Chris, and you might have heard this statistic, but, if we continue on the path of the way depression is filtering like an epidemic for our species, then by 2045, some of the major deaths in our world with our human species will be because of depression, right? And stress. So I'm just going to throw that in the conversation, because I'd love to know, what arises for you in this moment. But I feel this is the conversation, the education and awareness around basic needs, how to communicate what we're really thinking and feeling, how to deeply connect, feels like almost the healing balm that humanity really needs right now.
There's no doubt in my mind that is what humanity needs right now. You mentioned, the suffering in the world, and how, and when you really look at it and you really start paying attention to how much of it is really fixable, and really not even that difficult if we had that change in mindset that says that, we really, when I walk past that homeless person who is hungry on the street, we can pretend that doesn't affect us and keep walking by, but it does. It affects us at a very deep level, everyone, whether they acknowledge it or not. And if you pretend like it's not there, then you can kind of hide it from yourself, and you can, from your conscious self, you'll hide it, but from your subconscious self, who is connected to that suffering, when you walk by that, you actually feel, when you meet somebody, when you come into their presence, you feel something before you even talk to them. Just being in the presence of someone, you're going to feel their emotional state. And in fact, there's science on this you've probably looked at the Heart Math Institute, which shows that we have this electromagnetic field that is around each of us, produced by our bodies, and inside that magnetic field is information as to our emotional state, and our bodies can pick that up. Animals can pick this up very quickly. They're very in tune with this. If they come across someone who they know is has potential harm in them, or doesn't have like, you know, love emanating from them, then they're going to run away. They're going to be like gone. But if they come across someone who's very loving and comes in with that energy, they walk right up to them. So we have the same thing. We're no different. And so when we become aware that our emotional states, like we do absorb the emotional states of another, then being around people who are suffering makes us suffer too. And the more we can become consciously aware of that, you know, and maybe if you're unconsciously unaware that that's actually happening, then you might go and have a need for something, or a connection, or and you know, you might go do a behavior or act in a behavior that isn't going to meet your actual need for connection, but it might, you know, be an attempt. And if it fails, which it usually does, then you wind up trying again and again and again and again with a new product or a new service or a new tweak. But none of them will really ever meet the need, because the real need we have is to alleviate that suffering that we just walked by. And it's something that we can all do on a regular basis if we become aware that that's actually what we need. We need to not be around suffering, because we suffer. We're all empathic beings. We have mirror neurons, and when we see these things, we feel them too, whether we acknowledge it or not.
Yeah, and I think that's a real key point that you bring up, is that it's happening whether we choose to tune into it or not. And I think that's really what I feel many of us often are, because we're in avoidance, we're maybe numbing ourselves out. If I go back to when I was in a more unconscious state, or if I meet people now and again, this isn't a judgment of like, you know, better or worse. It's more about like, okay, this is somebody who's less aware, more unconscious. And like you rightfully said earlier, our conscious awareness is expanding constantly, and who knows how aware we can even become. Maybe if we become so aware, we just disappear, right? That's the whole point. Yeah, it's like we just disappear into that pure awareness, and we are awareness at that point. That's something I've considered at times. But what I really appreciate is sometimes I look at, you know, the big questions like, what's the meaning of life? What's the legacy that I'm leaving? You know, why am I here? What is my contribution, and what is actually happening on life? Because, you know, we have so many different concepts and theories. Suffering has to be there, and that these people have chosen it, and depending on what realms you explore, and you know, you might go into the angelic realm or the multiple dimension realms. It's like, you know, these souls have asked to experience what they're experiencing, and you can look at it from so many different angles, and depending on your belief, you can sort of justify and uphold those beliefs. And, you know, and then there's different psychological views and so on. And we're sort of surfing among all these different ways of viewing reality, right? Or interacting with reality. There's so many different ways that when I meet people, you know, that can be confusing in itself. So what I like to do is, among that, I like to open up my consciousness to that. I like to, you know, explore what it means to be a grand creator of reality. Definitely, that's what inspired me about your work as well, and your contribution to the world, and how you're really, you know, stepping out there on your own. And at times it seems like you are out there as a sort of visionary. I know you're not alone, and we're all in this together, and we're all playing our role. But, you know, you're out there, you're doing sustainable human, and you're creating this community, and really going against the grain of the, you know, the big conditioned ways of looking at society and looking at the systems that are in place. And we are witnessing so many of the systems crumbling all around us, and that in itself is scary for those that have identified and got attachments to that space, right?
Yeah.
So I feel maybe as we move into this sort of second half of the conversation, it might be really nice for us to ground in and really talk about solutions and the way that we can come together and get those basic needs met, and those needs met, and co-create together. Because I feel that that's what I really want you to define for me as well, if you can, or for people listening, because this is a passion of mine. I'd love you to define the gift economy for me. And if anything else in what I just said you feel is relevant for the conversation, please bring that in, Chris. But I'd love you to, like, us to sort of dive into the gift economy here, share that with the community that are listening, and also maybe, yeah, solutions of how we can continue to come together. And you know, because there might be, Chris, people listening in that, you know, just new to this awareness. Maybe they just had their own little awakenings. And there's also some people, like veteran people out there like us, many years sort of exploring this. So yeah, whatever comes up.
Yeah, sure. I think one thing, just on your previous point, around you know, the stories that we identify with, I think that it's kind of important or imperative even that we become disidentified with stories. And what I mean by that is when you think that you are the story that you are telling yourself, or that your belief or your story is the absolute truth, you know, and any other story is wrong, it's going to have major problems in terms of our ability to connect with people from other cultures, backgrounds, experiences, and who have different stories than we do. So I think it's best to not get attached to any particular story, to let them, to use those stories to accomplish our goals. And one of my goals as the transition is to be a supporter and to hold space for the idea of a global gift economy. Gift economies are nothing new. In fact, we all, I hope, at least I hope, we all participate in gift economies in our everyday lives already. Whenever we give a gift, whenever we have people over for dinner, at the end of the dinner, we aren't going around and giving each person who we invited a bill for dinner. We're not charging them all $20 for coming over. You know, so could you imagine, though, a world without any gifts? You know, imagine a world where it was customary on your 18th birthday for your parents to give you a bill for the 18 years worth of food and room and board that they provided for you. And, oh, by the way, the interest is now picking. You know, how would that change our family relationships if there were no gifts, if gifts were not in our lives? Gifts are actually what make life worth living. If you really think about it, if we couldn't give our gifts, it's like sharing. Gifts are like sharing with one another, you know, and sharing creates connection. Sharing creates intimacy. It fills those needs that we were talking about before. And so a gift economy is something that's, you know, obviously we already participate in it. And what's been happening, you know, over the last couple hundred years, you know, is that the gifts have slowly been eroded from our lives. And they've been, and Charles Eisenstein speaks to this very well. But he, you know, when we monetize a culture, when we pay someone to do something, it changes the dynamic. I've already just explained how that happens. So we all know how charging money for things changes a relationship, and it creates this, you know, this disconnection, really. Because at the end of the day, when I give you money and you give me something, and you know that I buy from you, we don't have to know each other. We don't have to continue a relationship. In fact, I'm not dependent on any individual person, but instead just a role that someone serves, and that role could be served by anyone. And so slowly over time, our gifts have been removed. It is a quick example from my own personal life. When I was young, I used to roam around 7, 8 years old. I used to go outside on my bike on a Saturday, and as long as I was home by sunset, my parents wouldn't worry at all. They wouldn't know where I was. I'd be anywhere in the neighborhood. Today, if you can't allow your 7 or 8 year old to do that, or you would lose custody of them. And so what you're supposed to do is pay for childcare. And so now what we've done is we've taken something that used to be given to each other by the members of the community. I'll look after the kids when they're in my neck of the woods. You'll look after my kids when they're in your neck of the woods. It's kind of this unspoken gift that the community was providing for each other. And what that did was it made it so that people didn't have to pay for childcare. Today, that's different. And if you go back in history, there are many examples of how a new product or service has replaced a traditional gift relationship. And I think this is ultimately why we have become more isolated as a society. The more that our economy grows, the more disconnected we actually become, and the more unhappy we actually become. And it gives rise, like you said, to that age of depression. Why are we depressed? Because we're not giving to each other. So this isn't something where, you know, you just need to like change your whole ideology and you need to like, you know, stop transacting with money. It just says, where in my life can I not spend money and instead create a gift or offer a gift? Instead of going to the movies, could I get my friends together and with a video camera and make a movie ourselves, create together? You know, that's one of the things that creates connection is when you create together with someone else.
Yes.
And you play together and you think together. But when you go out and you watch a movie, you're just consuming someone else's entertainment. So entertainment's a great example of where, you know, in our lives we can stop paying for entertainment and start giving entertainment to each other, and entertaining each other. And that's the way we usually did things for the majority of human history. Is, you know, we got around the campfire and told stories and we laughed and we cried and we did all these things together, you know, and we created that entertainment. We sang together, we danced together. And we've kind of lost that in our society as we've begun this monetization of entertainment and all the other aspects.
Yeah, that's a great encapsulation. And again, it's, I think sometimes people are feared of this idea of a new ideology or a new way of being, because we maybe sort of repeating what we've said before, but you have to die to the old ways, or if you want to call them old ways, you have to die to the ways that are not working. And often because we're so identified and many of us don't even know any difference. So it is like a death that has to take place. And I do the retreat one of the retreats that I do from the space of the gift. So we all split the cost share, and then everybody comes together just to cover the cost. And then we offer our time and energy and the whole experience as a gift. And then we invite people at the end to, from their heart, gift back what they feel they've experienced. And that doesn't have to just be in monetary exchange. We invite them to connect to their, like what you do on your website, your social platform, is like what skills, what talents, you know, what are their gifts, you know. And it's been so fruitful, Chris. I know you know this because you're sort of in the realm of it, but the gifts that have come back, the love, the connection, the unexpectedness, you know, for example, one woman invited us spontaneously to go to the Dominican Republic. I didn't know at the time when she came on the retreat that she even was the founder of a school out there with 1,500 children who come from slightly more deprived backgrounds. And she said, hey, can I pay for you to come over here and would you volunteer some work with the children, right? So wow. we ended up doing 9 days, 4 days with the teachers and 5 days with the students from 12 to 16, and sharing with them stuff on communication, anger, emotional release. Mm-hmm. And she sponsored us to go out there, gave us one of her, she had a smaller car that she was using for her children. She left us with that car and basically put us up, fed us, you know, wouldn't even let us put, she was like, she had such a great time on the retreat and loved what we were doing. She wouldn't, you know, she was like, look, I was like, I put some petrol in the car. She's like, no, I'm going to give you that back. And it was just like this constant, like, you know, receiving. And it was such a beautiful thing for us, because we're also having to learn how to like really just honor the receiving of such beautiful exchange and the fruitfulness and the abundance of, like, rather than, you said it beautifully earlier, but there's a word I use, which is, you know, moving from consumption to participation. And I know that, you know, the way that you flip the values around on your website, which I invite everybody listening to go over to sustainablehuman.com at the end of this call and just check out what Chris has written and the ethos of the site. But what was so rich just in that one example, and Chris, I could spend an hour sharing many of these examples, right? It's been like, you know, nearly 2 years now, 3 years, but the last 2 years more so. And what it did for me, Chris, is it really made me dive deeper into my ability to receive, and also this element of trust. And I'd love to know if that's been something that you've been really dancing with, this element of just trusting that, you know, that you will be supported, but not from that sort of airy fairy spiritual, I just sit at home and just think that I'm going to pull it to me, but really, you know, knowing that you're giving without expectation and you're not expecting an outcome, and that you are supported in that.
Trust is really key. In fact, trust is something that is generated from a gift economy. It's kind of one of the side effects. You know, I look at trust as really being the opposite of fear, in some ways, because, you know, fear is something that is it's like almost like a fixture in our common modern day story. You know, the fear of scarcity, the fear of death, the fear of losing someone you love, of not having control. These are all very common fears that people have. And I think that once you start realizing some of these natural connections, this fear also keeps us from wanting to connect with one another because we might get hurt.
Exactly.
And so, but once we kind of overcome that fear and we engage in this kind of, you know, trust is not something that is just has one measurement, right? You can have an inkling of trust, or you can have a ton of trust. You know, it's a scale. So what I'd like to say is, for those that are fearful, is, you know, just go to the first stage of trust, you know, and give it one chance to, you know, without expectation, you know, give without expectation, because that's the one thing that I think people get confused with a lot with the gift economy, is that they think, oh, okay, well, all I have to do is, if I just give, then I'll just get right away, you know, and I'll be rich, you know. But it doesn't really work like that, because the gift economy actually works around meeting needs. And we talked about our needs in the beginning of this conversation, but the gifts flow towards meeting the needs. So if you have all of your needs met, you know, physical, emotional, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to give you a gift, you know, if you don't need anything. But most of us do need something in this world. If not the physical needs, we have, you know, all the other needs that we mentioned earlier, validation and whatnot. But you know, the gift economy is something I think that really has the power to transform, and I think it's something that is a great avenue for transformation, because it's something we do all have experience with in our lives, so we can connect to that feeling.
I agree. Yeah, I agree, and I want to throw in there, I think that I think what you're saying there around what it does for me, I'd love to sort of hear as we. I know we're coming to a close of our hour. It's just flown by. I could talk to you for a lot longer on this, and I hope we can have more conversations, because
absolutely.
Because one of the things that I think that I'd love to say for people listening is that what it does for me is it really moves us beyond hierarchy and brings us into inclusion. And I really feel that, you know, somebody who, for example, Chris, you know, may think that they're unworthy, or they don't have much money, or they've not got much to offer in a gift economy, that just, in my experience so far, that just isn't the case. It's like, if anything, it really invites people to tap into the abundance of what they really have, and the gifts and skills that they have, and what they can offer in their support. And, you know, have you been coming across that with your experience?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, yeah, exactly. You know, a lot of people think they don't have gifts to give, and that's one of the saddest things that I come across when I come across someone who says that I don't have any gifts to give. That's where that comes from. It comes from not being needed by our economic system.
Right.
It comes from our talents not being able to be marketable. We can't sell our talents, so I don't have a gift, you know, and that's one of the saddest things that comes in our society, I think, because we all have a gift. And
exactly.
in fact, the most primal gift there is someone's attention.
Yes.
That's the most primal gift, and we all have that to give in equal amounts. You know,
yeah,
we all have the same amount of time in a day. That's the thing. You know, no one gets 26 hours in a day. So
I like, but you know what? You know, that's a really, you know, that's, and you know, I really hope that if you know, those that have tuned in with us and that listen to this back on the replay, just absorb that for a moment. This comes back to this lovely saying I always use: is simplicity is divinity. But just attention, just showing up and being there, curiosity, right? You know, imagine you've got an idea, you're co-creating, and as Chris said earlier, you know, we want to come together, we want to be playful, we want to co-create together, and you know, just you know, somebody coming together and going, wow, you know, I'm just here curiously and attentive to listen to your ideas. I mean, you know, what a gift, just somebody to listen to your ideas.
You know, you're sitting at the bus stop next to someone, you know, instead of pulling out your phone and checking your Facebook or, you know, doing something that, you know, really what you're trying to do is to create connection, right? That's why we're looking at our phones, is like, I want to feel connected to, you know, this like that someone put on my post or something like that, you know, but it's not meeting our real need for connection. So instead, you know, let's just start up a conversation with the person next to you and say, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
How are you doing today? You know, I care about you, you know, just genuinely, you know, and see what comes from that. You know, maybe nothing. Maybe that person is too fearful to have a conversation with someone they don't know. But maybe they're not. And maybe, you know, a friendship forms, maybe ideas form. Anything. That's the thing, is like, you don't know what's going to happen. And but you do know what's going to happen when you pull out your phone, or when you do the thing that you always do to distract yourself. You know, you're just going to get distracted and you're not going to create a connection. You know, you can be pretty sure about the end result, and then, you know, life becomes boring. But it doesn't become boring when we give our attention to people around us and we realize that we are all sharing so much. So many of the same feelings, I think, are being shared now by the population. But because we don't talk to each other, we don't even realize it.
Yeah,
That there's so much in common. We have far, far, far more in common. In fact, you know, that's part of the strategy of governments. I mean, governments want us not to realize that we can come together and provide for ourselves. They want us to think that they want us to be helpless, because if we're helpless, then we need the government, you know, to take care of us. And so they have a message out there which, you know, creates these identities, these fictitious identities, with concepts like being a Republican or being a Democrat. You know, my father is so much a Democrat that he won't even go to a dry cleaner who's a Republican. If he finds out the guy's a Republican, he'll stop going there. You know, that's how identified he is with being a Democrat. But that doesn't help you, because it just creates an artificial separation between you and that person when really there wasn't one to begin with. And so, you know, notice how the mainstream media uses these labels to divide people and to make them appear different than ourselves. But really, if we were to take the time to actually have that conversation, we'd realize we have far, far more in common.
Yeah. So, and when you were speaking just before about the bus stop or talking, it's like we've almost become scared. Yeah, in that denial and that numbness, we've become scared to connect as well. Like, we want connection, and then there's a fear to connect, because it's like, what will happen if I connect, and do I know myself in that space of connection, and am I, you know, am I able to even connect? Do I even know now? Some people are coming into the world, and do they even know what connection is, full stop, right? Like, it's almost like a curiosity and intrigue into what, maybe the conversation is, what is connection? You know, what is that in our vulnerable states, and how can we really break that? Which I think, as you're going to jump in on that?
I was just going to say, I think that connection is the lowering of the barrier of the self, of this, like, to include another. to realize that who I am, like if I say, who am I am the connections I have to other people. That's who I am. In fact, that's what defines who I am, is these connections, to my wife, to my children, to my environment, to the plants that are growing outside that are exhaling the oxygen that I'm now breathing, right? This is the type of connection that we're experiencing all the time. And I think really what we have to do is to let go of some of these mental identities that we have, that we associate ourselves with, because we'll say, I am a man, I am a Republican, I am a, which means that I am not a Democrat, and I am not a woman, and I am not these other things. And so I'm creating these artificial distinctions that says I am not that, but really you're connected to that. So it's the labels and stuff that I really think is the biggest challenge that we face in terms of how we define who we are. As these brands are really good at doing this, right? They like to sell us, if you wear Gucci or something like that, then that's supposed to mean something, about who you are, or the type of person you are. So the brands are always trying to do that. But they're not.
Exactly. And they're playing. Yes. Sorry, I was just going to say, and they're actually playing. They're playing on what you described earlier, which is our fears and our need for our need for connection, but then bringing it in from that falseness, which is false evidence appearing real. Using our fear in order to give us that the substitute joys and the substitute connection, which we just can't get from and outside things like consumerism.
The thing is it works. It works for a moment.
Yes.
That's the trick. So it's like, oh, I bought this new car. I feel cool. I feel great. I got this connection to this car, but it fades so quickly. A couple days later, even, and all of a sudden, that feeling that you had where you were connected to the car is vanished because the car is inanimate. It's not going to give you that feeling, that validation, that attention that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's not going to fulfill those needs that we spoke about. Oh, wonderful. Okay, well, Chris. So what I'm going to do is just to thank you so much for jumping in today. I know.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Simon. Like I said in the beginning, this is like exactly what is needed in this world. Is people talking about what's really going on.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge your work. So maybe a little question, just a little, it could be a couple of sentences, whatever, just for the people listening in. So, I had popping up. One of the things that I feel that we've spoken about today, and very much what I feel in the work that you're doing, is that there's this sort of seal, or you could say this connective gel, this matrix of love that really does flow through you. And I know that love itself has become marketable, and love itself is also can be misplaced and misunderstood on many levels. But I think maybe just as an out question, as a closing of our conversation today, our sacred space, our opportunity to meet for this first time and be connected by fellow friends out there on this path. What would you say are some real sort of basic in the day-to-day actions that people listening could implement, which would support them in being a more sustainable human? And I just want to also say, for the people listening, I want to highlight what Chris said earlier about love what you said about story. Today's talk is actually going to be named what stories are you telling? And I really feel that I love what you said about not getting attached to your own stories, and also really that by just doing that opens up more empathy and more awareness to be able to meet people where they are in their own stories, whether you believe them to be real or not. So I love that as an invitation for people. But what else pops up for you as a little closing? Anything, it can be anything.
Gosh, I mean, there's a lot, but the biggest thing I think is about creating that connection. I think that's the most healing and sustainable act that we can do right now, is to connect with more people on a real level. And that means not on the facade building level. There's a lot of connection that's built around, and friendships, quote unquote friendships, that are built around facade building, which I say is like, look at how great I am. I'll tell you how great you are, and you can tell me how great I am, and we'll just completely ignore every problem in the world. And and that's a way that, of course, this is the ego, right? The ego that wants this acknowledgement and validation and whatnot. But I would say that creating true connections, not only with other people, but with yourself, being honest with yourself, asking yourself why do I want this? Why am I doing this? What am I hoping that this action will achieve? These are questions that I think many people rarely ask. They just kind of get the impulse and act, and without really questioning why they're doing that. I think that that's a really important aspect of becoming a sustainable human, is realizing who we really are, and realizing that we are a sum total of our relationships, experiences, and connections. And then when we realize that, to cultivate them, to care about them, to put energy into making them better. And sometimes, unfortunately, this means that you do have to disconnect from people who are unwilling to be that honest, to be that transparent. You hold space for them. You always, you don't judge them, and you don't say, you're a bad person because you can't do this. But you just, maybe you check in a little bit later. You check in 6 months later and say, hey, I really care about you. I hope you're doing well. This is to the person who has problems with expression and with connection, or has too much fear perhaps to overcome that. But really, what's going to allow people to overcome that fear is someone who is genuine, who is non-judgmental, and who is holding space. I know that if it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have been able to go through the transformation that I had, because she offered me unconditional love and support, and didn't judge me for anything that I felt, even if it was judgeable.
So true.
So without, when we get that support, then so what we can do is we can be that support to someone else. We can be that non-judgmental support for someone else, and allow them the space and the freedom to explore who they really are. It's the biggest gift that we can give anybody. And the more that we do that, the more that we become connected and we're able to meet our own needs, our own emotional needs, well, then guess what's going to stop? Consumerism is going to stop. The exploitation of the planet to try to meet these emotional needs with physical products are going to stop. There's so much connected to this core, this conversation that we're having. This is a kind of a unique aspect of sustainability that I feel like I've been hitting on, because it's not just about changing from oil to solar panels. It's so much more deeper than that, because this desire for endless growth that our economy is built around is really what's causing the physical deterioration of the planet. And the reason why we're doing that is because we have these unmet emotional needs. So the more that we can help meet the emotional needs of another by holding space for them, by giving them their attention, then the more healing we wind up doing, because they're not going to go out and buy 3 new cars next year.
Exactly. I love that. So I so love that. And I love when people like yourself and it's the message that I share, and other people. It's like, it really is that if you really want to make a difference, you come back to what you've just shared. You come back to that personal transformation. You come back to those core needs. I really, really appreciate that. I really appreciate what you just said. It's a beautiful way to end our conversation. As I said, I know you are having this conversation with many people, and I also want to just acknowledge and say, I just want to say thank you for caring.
Thank you for caring, Simon. You know, meeting people and talking with people like yourself, you know, it energizes me. You know, I'm not like this superhuman or superhero or something like that. You know, I am a human being just like everyone else. And it's actually conversations and connections that keep me going. I'm aware of that. And so, you know, you reaching out to me, you know, now I'm going to be, you know, more connected going forward in the rest of the day and feeling good about myself, feeling happy. So, you know, I appreciate everything that you're doing for the world and holding space for this and allowing other people to be a part of it too, which is one of the benefits of the technology that we live in today.
Yeah, so true. So yeah, and just so you know, I know, like I've often said this to people out there when they're doing the work that we do, is I haven't met you, but that, you know, I know I said at the beginning, but your work has inspired me to, in that moment, to keep me connected on the mission that I'm on. And I've said that to Charles Eisenstein before, and many others that I've got the opportunity to speak with on the sofa. And I always say to the people listening, you know, start these conversations yourself. And you know, I really want to say, come over to sustainablehuman.com. You know, join the social network building. I'm on there. I just joined on there just yesterday because I've been meaning to do it for ages, and having this call with Chris, I was like, I want to get on there. And you know, we just come together and create this connection that Chris and I have spoke about today. So there you have it. Thank you so much, everybody. Super beautiful for those that joined us live. Thank you for coming back and listening to the replay. And if you love the conversation that I'm creating, please look at the links below the video. There's you can become a patron of the sofa and contribute like $1, $2, $3 for each of the conversations I create. That supports me to continue doing what I'm doing and setting up the calls and just, you know, just continuing this conversation. And each one that I have always supports me, so I know that it's supporting those that get to listen. Have a great day, Chris. Have a wonderful day. All the best. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Simon.